Hey, Mark. It's just you. This is a very empty place.
It has been lately. I'm not happy about that.
How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm in Chicago this Tuesday, Wednesday, and
Good.
fortunately my offsite doesn't begin for another hour. So
Chicago is East Coast time or 1 hour behind?
Central.
Hmm?
Central.
Okay. All right. So looks like not much going on today. Want to
Well, we'll
wait a few
see.
more minutes?
I'll give people a couple more minutes. What I'm doing right now is there was this email exchange about replay and relay attacks.
Yeah.
Well, it's Osama's favorite type of attack, it seems. So what I've been doing, hi Yogesh, what I've been doing is
How
sort
you
of
doing?
eyeballing the swimline diagrams right now to see if there is anything I can identify as an actual attack. Yogesh, I have a quick question for you. You said
Yeah,
that the diagrams, so I edited the text, and you said they were a mess, and I was surprised.
yeah. If you see your original text, I think you meant option one, variant one, but it was variant two which you meant.
Oh yeah,
But you
no,
wrote,
but I'm
yeah,
talking about the diagrams itself. You're correct; those were reversed.
yeah.
Um, but
Okay, the diagrams, the original diagrams were like it is all the boxes on the top which shows the entities were completely like
they
broken
weren't
when
not
it
for me.
rendered.
For me, they weren't. Okay. Maybe
I don't know
maybe
when it rendered for me on the
yeah,
editor's page.
yeah.
It didn't render the properly. It was looking great when it I see it in the ASCII art. It was
Right.
looking great.
Yeah.
But when it translates into the HTML page, which everybody is going to watch, they
Yeah,
were
yeah, yeah.
completely,
That would I see. So that was the problem. Okay.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
All right. So
But
let's do
everything is fixed now, so everything is in proper now,
okay,
order
good.
now. You saw Usama's comment, right? Two things he
Yeah,
had
I
a very
was I
he's like that of a character actually. So he's
he's what?
quite he's a
No,
kind of a
I
character
know.
that
He really he doesn't trust TLS very much, and he worries about relay and replay attacks. But I
yeah
think in this case he's forgetting that the verifier and the credential authority and the key store, they're effectively all part of the TCB here.
yeah
So we don't expect them to misbehave for us. And
mm,
if our trust model is different, then of course. But look, yeah, some will do, some will do. I'm a little worried about the fact that one of the flows has no freshness in it.
yeah
See, personally, I always wondered why we bother with freshness. Um,
okay
but also this is not a mountain I can move. Um, so, okay, let me do this. I'm gonna put meeting minutes in the chat so you can do your own updates. I usually have more screens than I have today because I'm not in on my home turf. Um, so those are meeting minutes and the reference architecture document is here. So what I did last night is I went, let me share my screen now. Okay, you should be able to see it now. I went and I basically transferred the content um, from the informational draft to this. And there were a few changes that I made. I put tracking on, but I should probably. Okay, so what I just wanted to go over a few things. So we never finished the entity relationship diagram. I do not know if it's a good thing to spend on time today or not, but it's still something that we should um, at some point um, do. Um, I just realized, and this is another thing, that we have these two pictures that we actually need. We need to. I wonder if this can be saved as SVG so it can be rendered by the tool, but that's another thing we need to do. But the third topology here is where workload talks to the credential authority, which talks to the verifier. It's just simply not listed here. And that's the one where we have problems with freshness, right? Because there is no way for the workload to get, it's not talking to the verifier. So do you have any thoughts on whether that mechanism can be kept or should be dropped because of that? Or, what do you think should be done?
Look, the freshness, there are there are two aspects. One is the dynamic credential acquisition at the time when the remote attestation occurs. We
Yeah.
can demonstrate the freshness in that. But when we are doing a passport model where we do the attestation at one point in time and the attestation result act as a passport and we keep using that passport for n number of instances, the freshness aspect doesn't come into play in that use case, because the timestamp of attestation result and the freshness, that is only for that transaction of generating attestation results. That's all. So uh,
Okay.
depending upon, yeah.
So how do verifiers work today? Like Google's, Microsoft, do you actually know? Do they permit the submission of evidence without freshness?
Sorry, say that again. How does Google
How?
and Mike? Yeah,
Yeah. So normally in the regular exchange, what happens is the workload gets a nonce from the verifier, and then that
yeah,
includes that nonce in evidence.
correct.
All right. So
Signed evidence. Yeah,
if the workload went to the credential authority first, then there is no way because it goes like let's look at the swim lane for a second.
yeah. Let's
Um,
look at the flow first. Yeah,
yeah, it's that. It's this one, right? So you
mm,
generate a credential key, you create the credential key proof of possession, and then you create the credential request with this evidence. You create evidence and then the credential request with evidence and the credential key proof of possession. And then you go send that. There is no nonce.
yeah.
So this step where you request attestation evidence from credential request.
So I think what we should do is, I think our flow can be a little bit reversed. We should ask for initiation of attestation, or we start some transaction with uh, the verifier, which then injects us a nonce, and then we start this generate credential key and
So
create
you're
evidence.
saying you want to add a line here.
Yeah, exactly.
So
That I want
but
to
then the
do.
thing
Yeah.
is, you need to know that there is verifier behind your credential authority before you start talking to the credential authority. Is that it?
Yes. Now in this case, okay, you are talking. Hold on. In this case, your credential authority is acting as a medium to communicate with the verifier, right?
Yeah.
And then the verifier returns an attestation result, and scroll down a bit. I'm seeing only up to return attestation results. And then, okay. So here the nonce can be generated effectively by the credential authority. The
But then
freshness
it's
can
not
be
in the
generated.
evidence. Then it's not going to be in the evidence.
Why?
Well, are you saying there has to be a step first where workload goes to the credential authority and say, give me a nonce?
Yes,
And then the credential authority goes to the verifier and says, give me a nonce.
not necessarily. The nonce can be generated by the credential authority and passed to both sides. That's relying party generated nonce use case, where the freshness is created by the credential authority. It echoes it to the workload, it echoes it to the verifier.
Okay.
Then the verifier include your attester, the workload includes that nonce into the evidence, which is signed, integrity protected, and then the verifier gets that same freshness parameter, and it decodes the evidence, extracts out the nonce, and verifies that this is the same nonce which is given to me by the credential authority. So it verifies that the nonce echoed by the credential authority is the same as that I've received in the evidence from the workload.
All right, so like this, basically.
Yeah.
Can you see my screen here?
Yeah, just a minute. Yeah, if you can render it, then yes. Yeah. Generate non, return nonce, and then return the nonce to the verifier also. On the same flow, you send a nonce to the verifier also. Yeah. So it's called relying party generated nonce.
And you're saying,
Yeah. Nonce is controlled by the credential authority, and it tells both the parties that here is the freshness you must use. And then the verifier checks, decodes the evidence, takes out the nonce and checks whether this is the same nonce as given by the credential authority. So this is the fresh evidence coming from the workload as the parameter given by the credential authority to me. Yeah.
so that's how, is this correct
Yes.
now?
Yes. Yeah. It's correct now. Yeah.
Okay. I'm gonna copy this into there. Like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
In every situation, the nonce handling can be slightly different, I think, because we have a passport, we have a background, and I think you have a mix of a passport and a background as well. I think in some case. So I need to check all the cases and then we need to add nonce handling in all these cases, which can be in the first, in the subsequent revision. I mean,
Yeah.
I think in our draft, we didn't do the nonce handling, but that's fine. We don't need a perfect draft to start the conversation. It is just the
We
initial
are
talk.
allowed to update the draft before the ITF meeting, correct?
Yes, but not at this moment in time. I think there is a cutoff till we should not edit the draft because people are supposed to read the existing draft. So we should not publish a new release on the data tracker. I think on the hackathon day, on the Saturday, we are allowed to open the gate and then submit a new draft.
I see.
Yeah,
Okay.
because it is as the process is that you are giving people 2 weeks to read your draft and come prepared on that revision. And that's fine. I mean, this is the initial draft. It doesn't need to be perfect. It's just a talking discussion point. It's just a starting point of conversation in this world, in this ecosystem.
Yeah.
It's not a perfect draft. We can have 1, 2, 3, 4,
Right.
5 revisions down the line.
So let me
Nobody.
ask you this question,
Yeah.
because I'm also, this is more of a, uh, I'm trying to figure out what I should promise my boss for like business results for next year. This is that time of
Mm.
year, right? Do you think, over the next 3 ATF meetings, it would be realistic to turn this into an RFC, or is it a longer process than that?
I think it is a longer process than that. There is a adoption process. So um, whatever type of RFC, it could go to informational case, which is just an informational draft, or a normative standard.
Mhm.
Depends on what the ITF sees it. But if the ITF body connects with the problem and accepts it as a valuable work to be published in some degree of RFC, then there is a process of adoption.
Mhm.
And the process of adoption is typically based on some kind of a polling. So it would be a call for adoption on the poll to say, do you see the value in this work? Should we get it adopt? If it gets into adopted, in the rats will absorb this document as this work, and then it will progress it in its cycle of RFC, which could be easily between 1 to 2 years. But adoption itself is a big success because then it allows experts to work on this, comment on this, review it, and improve it, and make it a full polished document.
Gotcha. But
Yeah.
adoption, do you think adoption is realistic within a year?
Yeah, definitely. Adoption is a great success. So yes, adoption can definitely happen in 6 to 9 months,
Yeah.
provided we explain the problem properly. What is the problem and what is the solution we are offering, or how our solution helps the ecosystem, industry, doing what exactly are we trying to do here? That's need to be clearly told. And I think we have a good meat around that to tell a proper story of what we are trying to achieve here, right?
Right.
So I'm
Okay.
confident that we should push for adoption, call for adoption.
Okay. Fair enough.
Yeah.
Okay. So, anyway, so what I did, I basically moved content effectively unmodified um from the draft text into the reference architecture. So all of that, I don't think we should be talking about background check model because that's going to be, that's pretty much handled. We didn't, yeah, we didn't make much progress on SPIFFy, making confidential computing first-class citizen yet, but I'll keep pushing on that. It's not something we can do in this meeting. Let's see. So workload lifetimes we already talked about. Let's see. We talked about short-lived workloads. I encourage you guys to go and re-review all of this. We already have sequence diagrams. These are not for the draft because they have to do with like short-lived credentials and sealing credentials to the platform, right? So I should probably update them. That's not just the credential, but the key. It's ultimately what you need is you need to get the key, not the yeah, I need to update this. I'll do that. Let me actually put a little to do on this. Okay, so it's going to be, I will update this for short-lived credentials, so let's not worry about that. There is this whole thing about provenance that we should, and again, I need to get, like Mateusz was active in this, and then he kind of dropped by. We talked about provenance binding, integrating provenance credential issuance. All of that needs to be revisited. Platform binding. Do you think this belongs here, or should this be done as part of the multi-attester? Because I don't think we need to be tackling something here that needs to be part of the, right? Because remember, part of the credential is claims about the, you know, are you in Germany? Like,
Platform binding. But is the connection of a particular workload to a particular platform important for you?
well, look, it is important that the credential issued to the workload is correct for that workload running on that platform. But I believe
Exactly.
that's the multi-attester case. So if that's solved as part of your exchanging evidence for credential flow, right, then that's that.
And is there a policy that this credential is only applicable specific to this platform, and when you migrate the workload or move the workload to other platform, that credential is no longer applicable?
Well, it depends, right? So, and by the way, I hope that the compositor or like this, you know, compositor tester work group actually handles migration, right? But how I think about it is, does migration invalidate any of the claims? And if so, then the credential must no longer be valid. So if I moved my workload from Germany to France, so, okay, if I move my workload from Germany to France and my claim says I'm in Europe, that's a valid migration. The credential can be preserved. But if my claim is I'm in Germany, well, that credential is no longer valid after migration, right?
Yeah.
So one option, the dumb option, brute force option, is every migration invalidates every credential. And then you
Yeah.
never need to worry about it, right? But if you are going to preserve credentials in some way, then you need to understand is, you know, some way of figuring out, is my credential still valid after this migration? And that seems complicated.
Yeah. I'm coming to one common answer to your question. This is really the policy of the deployment of workload credential, whether a migration retains the identity or identifier, stable identifier, or it needs to reissue the identifier. It's really up to the policy of the deployment, right?
Yeah.
So
So
maybe we need some kind of a language which takes it to a policy level. You can do this, or you can do that, or you can do further that. It's all based on the policy of my deployment or something like that. We should clarify that.
Yeah, I think the especially if we use the passport model in cases where we want resilient systems, the credential that the workload gets should be inherent to the workload itself. So should, be kind of like biometrics of the workload. And then the fact that this specific instance of the workload, I'm sorry, if maybe it is with the definition of workload, I forgot if it's an instance or, but the fact that this specific instance is deployed in a place that comes from another chain of authority, and it is indeed a composite, business logic that needs to say, I have the right workload. It is the right binary running in a trustworthy platform, and this platform is physically located in Germany, and the policy, which has another chain of authority, says that this workload should only work on a machine in France, and so that's that policy engine that needs to decide whether or not to then enable the connection to to the relying party. So I think we need to detangle those problems. Otherwise, you're going to end up with a mess of credentials that serve multiple purposes, in spite of the fact that they have different chains of authority with different life cycles of policies and decisions and upgrades and stuff like that. At least that's how we approach it. We approach it in by literally saying who has authority over what, and then making sure that each one of those chains of authority results in credentials that are individual and that are, how to say that, inherent to the business logic that will need to assess that credential. And so it really, otherwise you have a tangle of multiple authorities that may have different life cycles of decisions and issuance of credentials that need to be somehow bundled into one credential. That creates that then you end up in the case where you say we need to invalidate all credentials, or we need to invalidate independently of the chain of authority.
So what I'm hearing is this is something this is not just for this case,
That's right.
right? So this should be I want the reference architecture to stay focused on a thing and not like go and into other architectural layers. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but I spoke up because precisely I feel like we are mixing layers here.
Yeah.
I think and I have another comment about if this is the CCC reference architecture, I'm wondering why we want to list all the possible options of how things could be done. I think we should be opinionated, and the CCC reference infrastructure architecture should say this is the optimal way of doing it, and then saying, if you do this, if you deviate from that optimal, this is what you lose, or this is the additional trust that you have to,
So my
but
position
that's a
is
separate consideration. Let's
my
go back. Let's go
position
back
is to not consider composite attesters and migrations here, and basically say this will be handled in other architectures.
Then I think
That's easy then. Then it becomes really easy
right,
because
but
you're saying
then I think it is important that in this document, then we issue, I don't know how to say that, but unitary or individual credentials that do not tangle, that do not are inherently composite. I guess that's what it is. You don't want a credential that has Germany and it's the right binary all in one, because now you've introduced the composition problem. So it really has to be unitary, individual credentials that are issued in this
I,
document.
I, okay, let me think out loud here. Having like geolocation as one of the claims is kind of important to trustworthy, like certainly to the enterprise use case. And what my preference, I think, and again, I'm just thinking out loud here, would be that we basically say we operate in a world where there is a credential or perhaps a collection of credentials that are coupled together that communicate to a relying party something about this workload. Now, there is this thing of migration which may invalidate a part of this bundle, but it's outside the scope of this reference architecture, how that migration will be handled and how the, reacquisition of credentials might happen.
Yeah, I hear you, but so for instance, who has authority over saying that this credential is as intended, right? That's the CI/CD pipeline. That's the team, the development team, and the DevOps, the folks who are saying this is the code, this is the best, the latest version of this code. So that's one chain of authority, and your verifier is going to expect a credential or something that's going to say, hey, it matches these reference values. And those reference values have to be injected in in whatever repository that the verifier can access. And the life cycle of these issuance of, the reference values being put into the system, the credential that gets, and the workload being deployed, that has a certain life cycle. And then you have another team, which is your policy team, saying, hey, this workload needs to live in, French, in this French data center. And then suddenly you have a deal with another data center in Germany, and you say now it can migrate. That is another source of authority where this specific workload with this fingerprint, these reference values can now live, they no longer live in France, should live in Germany. And that has a different chain of authority. And that's a different reference value that your verifier needs to go and get from potentially somewhere else that has a different life cycle. And so all I'm sharing is that the way that we detangle those things is by identifying who has authority over what, because it may be it almost always are different chains of authorities.
Yeah, yeah. No, I actually hear. I think it's an excellent idea to consider that. And as you were talking, I was thinking, so there is the credential. Credential is public. Credential, anyone can see that. And the secret sauce is you cannot use credential without a key. Or maybe you cannot use credential without a set of keys that represent different parts of the overall, like, bigger credential. Maybe there is a portion of the credential that speaks to, or the overall, that speaks to the workload, and there is another one that speaks to the platform. And perhaps on migration, you may lose one of those other keys. And again, so I'm sort of, designing in my head and speaking out loud at the same time.
Totally
Right.
fine.
And there, if your migration is allowed per policy, then the workload retains access to the keys it needs to use the credential. And the migration is disallowed by policy. Well, some of those may become invalid, and the workload will somehow discover that it needs to reacquire those keys.
Correct.
Post
And
migration.
and to me, the conversation between the verifier or the issuer and all that, I mean, at least in our model, again, can be more sophisticated. Indeed, it is, you give a key to the workload, you know that the workload, because you've verified the attestation of the workload, you know that it's trustworthy, that it will do what you'd expect it to do. And then the workload itself can then take on some of the, where am I? I'm going to talk to another, what we call agent in our model, another workload that's going to say, tell me more about what I cannot do. And so you can have a more distributed way of dealing with, what can and cannot happen. And you can rely on the workload doing the right thing because you've actually verified it up front.
So it still seems to me, and like Yogesh, if you're looking at these like composite attestations, right, and complex attestation scenarios, it still feels like it should be handled in that working group and not here.
Yes, of course, because there are two sets of claims in composite. One is the workload specific claims, and the other is a platform specific claim, and there is a link between the two.
Yeah.
So,
And further,
yeah,
you may move to what if you move to a server that has an unpatched GPU, and all of a
yeah.
sudden, well, I do not know. It's like, does attestation fail? Does migration fail? Like, it's like all of these cases must be considered. But again, I would like to use just enough language in here to create sort of an architectural boundary between the two things, because we
Yeah.
should not be handling, like, I do not think we should be handling this here.
Uh,
Or do you feel we should, and we should like somehow make provisions for it? And then let's talk about what those provisions might be.
I haven't had the bandwidth to follow the composite discussions very closely, and even these discussions. So I apologize for that. I'm always a little bit too high, not close enough to the problem set. But
no,
it
I
it
think,
it, it felt to me that the composite attestation group right now is indeed very, very low in the stack. I think what we are discussing, Mark, about a policy about where a workload
yeah,
runs is a higher level, a higher layer thing.
yeah,
It's really a policy engine, and there's a policy agent in our world that would, collect evidence, or higher level evidence of different entities, not just the low level workload and the chip, but and then the reference values that are coming from different systems. So there's a higher level composition here. And if the composite working group is indeed considering kind of all types of compositions, then I think it is the right place for them to
Well,
detangle
it
that mess.
seems what it seems like is yes, it's very low level right now,
Right.
but it also seems like, and Yogesh is one of the like sort of the lead architects on that composite stuff. This is why I'm glad Yogesh is here.
yeah,
Is I believe the composite working group needs to consider migration.
Right.
And, there is a little bit of cross-pollination here because we need to understand the scenario of a workload retaining access to credentials across migration.
Yep.
But
yeah,
the
yeah,
fact that workloads have credentials, and maybe credential is a bundle, and maybe keys are a bundle, and maybe we haven't really uh, fully reflected that in the wording. Here we're just saying there's a key and there's a credential. There's
That's
one and
right.
one. But okay, maybe there is a bundle. We can update our wording for that. But how that bundle is affected by migration should be handled by the composite tester group. And they need to think about how the workload interacts with that stack.
Right.
Yogesh, do you
so
agree?
uh, the the group will say that the group talks about claims coming from two different environments. So you have a workload and then you have a platform. Those two are different environments, right? A
Yeah,
workload sits on top of the platform or
right.
the hosting environment, you call it, right?
Yeah,
So you generate claims about the platform and you generate the claims about the workload, and then you show the connect between the two by some
yeah,
claims. The very
right.
crypto binding of a parameter goes into the platform claim to show that that workload binds to this platform. So those are the claims which we can produce and explain that in the composite attester working group. Now, when you get that attestation, you check your policy to say that is this workload binding to this platform allowed or not allowed. Okay, if it is not allowed, you can fail giving the credential. If it is allowed, you will issue a credential. What if this then workload dances from one platform to the another? The evidence will change now because the binding is changed, the platform claims will be different. What do I do then? Should I keep the workload credential the same, or should we reissue a credential? Is a policy decision which is done by the credential issuer. So I'm that operates at a higher level, as Manu said, I think.
Yeah. So
Well,
Uh,
still need,
so that's why
yeah.
it's the verifiers, it has to be a verifier of verifiers and an issuer of issuers. I mean, I'm sorry to use these, but it is a recursive problem, and it is a higher layer, but you do have to have verifiability of the higher level composition to be
Yeah.
able to do what you want to do, Mark, which
Yeah.
right.
is
But
So
what
which is
exactly you want to do? Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
so
Exactly.
look, I'm thinking about how would I prototype this to make sure that like things work. And
Mhm.
uh yeah, so what pops into my mind here is that uh the a workload is not a passive consumer of credentials and keys. Well, it actually may be a passive consumer of credential because the credential might be pre-provisioned. And it certainly does not have a passive relationship with keys. right? The workload needs to do something to get the key, and that something is attestation.
Correct.
And now the question is, how does it know that it needs to engage in a new dance with either the verifier or the key store to get a new key for the credential in its possession, right? So like live migration to the workload is actually a silent operation, my understanding is. Like, you go to sleep, you wake up, you're in a new chicken coop with new chickens around you. Right? And now
Now we're in the chicken business.
I have chickens, so
Oh, there you go.
That's a
okay.
good example of his business.
This is
I
fantastic. This is the personal touch. This is the personal touch in a global business,
that's
loose
right.
collaboration.
You
I
learn you
love it. I
learn.
love it. We
So
get to
if you
know
want to
something about
introduce
you,
new
Mark.
chickens into your flock, then it's actually a very good idea to carry them inside the chicken coop when they're, when everyone's asleep. And if they wake up with new chickens around them, kind of assume, well, that's my new family. And if you introduce them while everyone's awake, they fight. So anyway,
Well, but
but
this is
anyway,
unfair, Mark. It is unfair because you're using analogies that we don't have lived experience with those analogies. I don't know chickens, so I can't follow you, and there's all
no.
kinds of things that you are
Okay.
implicitly. All
Well,
right,
so with my superior knowledge, I guess what I'm trying to explain here is that there probably might be some sort of a dance, because we already said how the relationship of a workload with its key is not passive,
right,
right? Which might mean that a time may come where workload attempts to use a credential, by meaning credential with a key, and fails. Like the access to the key is like it's like, or the key is invalid, or there's got to be some mechanism for the workload to find out I got to do something to revalidate my key. That might be reattesting, it might be all sorts of things, but
Yes.
right. And so maybe what the composite attestation group is doing right now, it's too low level, and maybe what we're trying to do here is too high level, but that middle layer, that glue, still needs to be defined, and it
yeah,
will involve some work on behalf of the workload to
correct.
know to engage in the dance.
Correct. And in our world, again, the
That's a
workload,
good point. Yeah.
yeah, when a workload comes up, it is, in fact, when we went through, we work with MITRE to do a cryptographic analysis of how, we were chaining verifiers. And what appeared first was that, in fact, a child verifier, that I guess an attester, starting attestation with the verifier, first it needed to know, both parties needed to know each other of each other. So that's one thing. There was no way to, I mean, there was always a way to break the cryptographic security if your chicken didn't know who it had to go and verify itself to. So
Yeah,
that was one. And the second thing that we realized is that, well, although the verifier is verifying the workload itself and its biometrics, if you want, that to create composite attestations, or I shouldn't say attestation, I mean, it's going to be confusing, but to create composite logic to make decisions as to whether a workload should proceed doing something, it can rely on other verified workloads. And in fact, we envision policy agents that are there, and a workload that's coming up is getting attested and verifies and get verified by the verifier in its business logic. Then the workload would go and talk to a policy workload that itself has been verified and say, okay, I'm now here and this is what I want to do. Am I allowed to proceed with that? So instead of trying to pack everything in the verifier or come up with composite verification and the credential issuance, we do see a policy agent in our world, or would be a policy workload that is almost like a peer of those other workloads of the chicken. And the chicken goes to the policy chicken in the coop, in the new coop, if you want, and then says, what am I doing here? Am I supposed to operate here? And because the chicken was attested to be compliant, to be, respecting the instructions that it gets from the policy chicken, it will comply and it will shut itself down or just not, access any information or whatever. So I think there's a policy chicken in the coop that may or may not be you, the verifier of the chickens.
yeah. I guess, but I still want to come back to this, yeah. And in question of layering, I believe we should deal with like basically whenever workload needs a new credential, it should be able to get a new credential and need to get a new key, right? It should be that discussion should be done at a lower level than this document, and perhaps at a higher
Yeah.
level than the compositor tester document. But if I were to pick one area for that middle layer to live in, it has to be the compositor tester group that needs to figure it out.
Okay. Glad you gave a feedback. So we will talk about that in the compositor tester discussions we might
And
have next
like
time.
maybe another like I'm just the thing is I think forming a third group around that glue is probably going to be counterproductive.
No, no, I agree with you. Somebody has to take. My question to you, Mark, going back to you is there a scenario we can produce here in the scenario document which shows that I migrated to a new platform, then I started to use my old credential which was issued me on the old platform and it failed, and now I realize that it failed with the cause unrecognized platform, and then I create a new request of acquiring the credential from the workload, and then the workload talks to the credential authority, and then it does the full end-to-end remote attestation dance to get a new credential. Can we write a document a scenario
We
like
can
that?
write that scenario. My mind immediately went to this. If the credential acquisition is passive, right? So there is active where I actually went and got my credential. And the
Yeah.
passive is the control plane gave me the credential. Now I only need to get is the key,
Yeah.
right?
Okay.
In that case, presumably the key is inside my address space,
Correct. But that
right?
key is no longer valid now. Maybe.
Well, if
Yeah.
the key is no longer valid, but the key is the private key for the public key in the certificate, then
Correct.
this means it means that the credential needs to be reissued.
Exactly. And the failure of one credential leads to the reissuance in the new.
But this mean,
So
but here's the thing: the conflict here is if I expect it as a workload that the credential is given to me and all I need to do is get the key. There's going
yes,
to be
for
this one unfortunate scenario where I have to
mm,
go renegotiate with my control plane and say, hey, you actually need to give me a new credential here. Or alternatively, as part of migration, the new credential needs to be issued. For all I
mm,
need to do is get the key for it. But we need to be
yeah,
careful that we don't lose track of this state transition.
exactly. My question to you is the credential key different than the credential itself and how
Well,
they are
the
related?
credential, so let's just like, in the most
Mm,
common case, the credential is a certificate, so there is a public key encoded in that,
okay.
right? And the key is the private key for the public key,
Okay.
right? So I can't just say, well, I could say the key is inaccessible, but that means the key lives in a separate, under separate security boundary, which is
Mm,
realistically not going to happen, like
okay.
in most cases. So we kind of pretty much are stuck with the fact
Say
that,
say that again, Mark.
well,
The last piece.
so where does the private key live, right? In most cases, for an active workload, the private key is in somewhere in kernel memory.
Should
It
it
does
be?
not live on a smart card. It doesn't live under separate security boundary.
I thought that it would live in the
The TE.
trusted TE
Yeah,
of
well,
your
it works on the
platform,
TE
right?
of the
Or
workload itself.
yeah,
It's
That's right.
inside the workload.
That's
it's
right.
inside the workload. Yeah, yeah,
Right,
yeah.
it's not in a separate compartment. Although, I
It's
mean, yes, you can design hardware to make, the key live in a separate compartment, only use it for signing, and
Yeah.
one moment it's all no longer accessible. It's just not how workloads work today.
that's
This
right.
is
Okay.
not a common enough case
Okay,
that we can
understood.
depend on it.
It is
Okay, so the
inside
key,
the
the
VM
key,
basically.
the private key is in the TE.
That's
No,
right.
not in the TE. It's in the VM. It's the
Well,
confidential workload, right?
yes,
Well,
okay, the
Which is
it's
enclave
the
or
inside
whatever.
the
TE.
Yeah,
trust execution environment boundary, which means that you can't really invalidate the key without invalidating the credential.
Hmm. Okay, got you.
but
Okay, so the key gets migrated as well smoothly to the new workload platform.
That's right.
Hmm.
As part of workload migration, you just moved the key too,
Okay, got you.
right?
Hold on, but
And
the private key cannot be in the clear. I mean, how do you?
the private key is in the clear inside the T. Yes.
Yes, but where does it live before? It's generated.
Well, yeah,
Okay.
you could generate it, so you have it,
Yeah.
right? It's not in a separate T, like
No, of course. Yeah, it should be within the
right.
same.
So when it migrates, like the migration is effectively moving the entire address space of the T to the new place.
Oh, so you're
Yeah.
talking about live migration.
Yes.
Yeah. Think like a TE, which is a VM, right? Think like a virtual machine, a
Yeah.
VM box, which is a confidential VM. You are moving the confidential viewing VM from one platform to the other, and in that confidential VM box, he has the key. So the
Yeah,
key
that's
gets
right.
migrated that
With it, it's
automatically to the with
just
it.
another
Yeah.
piece of memory. So you can either disallow the migration by policy,
Yeah.
but if you allow migration by policy,
Hmm.
you're kind of stuck.
My question, I will go back to the fundamental question. Does your credential cares what platform your workload is running on? Does it care?
Well, if you know who cares, the regulator cares. If my workload that I attested to be in Germany, if my control plane moved it to France and all of a sudden it's running in France and accessing
Hmm.
data on German citizens, that's who cares.
Hmm. Okay, I got you. So the credential issuer has a stake in knowing where the platform, what is the platform on which it is
Yes,
running.
yes,
Okay. Okay, it has a stake in there.
yes.
So, okay, so that
I
as soon as
still
the
come
work,
back. I still come
uh,
back to the fact that this needs to be a composite attester. Composite attester
you,
group needs to take up live migration.
hmm, okay, okay, makes sense. I'm thinking once the workload gets migrated, it does a reattestation. If it does reattestation, can I fail the credential?
Well,
If
you
it
can
is,
force it. You can force it to do reattestation and hope
yeah,
that it does. In fact, I don't think
hmm,
you can even force it. Short of
good point.
terminating
Why?
it, it pretty much you have to sort of ask it, which is different, and hope that it does.
So who is the entity would we ask? Because it moves to Germany, from Germany to France, potentially it would connect to the network in France.
Yeah.
And at some point, the network in France should ask you to do the attestation. So somebody should ask it to do the attestation now again. And I'm just checking
Yeah.
who is that entity which should ask it an attestation and who should bootstrap the identity credential again. That's what is not clear to me at the moment in the migration case. I will have to think. But honestly, feel free to. Okay, if you're not, I will raise a GitHub issue on the composite attester GitHub.
No, I attend those meetings and
Okay.
but like as much as I'm leading this effort, I'm not leading that effort. And
Yeah, no, I understand. I'm leading that effort and I'm quite interested in helping you out here.
yeah.
So
So
we will solve the problem whichever group it falls into,
I
this
think
group or that
here
group,
we
doesn't
need to
matter.
basically say that,
Mm, mm.
we should say something about migration, but I
Yeah.
think it needs to be more like, passing the buck over to the compositor tester saying, you know,
Mhm.
it needs to be solved, just not here.
Okay.
And then look, if somehow it bubbles up and there is a way for workload, like there are actions that absolutely needs to take to be migration safe,
Mhm.
then we'll bring it back in scope. But for now, it seems like we should not be doing that here. Like, and this is not me, punting on it. It's me basically saying,
Mm.
let's solve it, but let's solve it in the place where it belongs.
Mm, okay, I will read your document, this one, and I will try to make an assessment where it should belong.
Okay.
Honestly,
I
I've slightly lacked the knowledge to make a judgment here where it
Yeah.
belongs.
Okay.
Yeah,
I'll see what I'll probably need to stop early today
yeah,
because
same with me. Yeah,
yeah.
Yeah, I have to drop off
And
too.
I'll
Yeah.
see you guys next week.
yeah.
Please review this. Start making like changes, suggestions. We still need to take up provenance. Um, like really, it takes a little bit of time to get some clarity on it, but it's just like some parting words. Is that we have so the last IETF, we talked to Whimsy, basically saying we need industry standard credentials for trustworthy workload identity. That was like sort of one thrust. There was a separate thrust that was saying we need these identifiers to be stable. So this is our ask of rats. And really, the name of the draft should really be stable identifiers for confidential workloads. It's not really about trustworthy. Like trustworthy is more for Whimsy thing. Trustworthy is saying, Whimsy, please work with confidential computing. For rats, it's a different pitch. It's saying we need the workload identifiers to be stable.
But the anchoring has to be with remote attestation. Otherwise, the rats will say, "Why are you talking to us? Go talk to Whimsy."
Yeah, absolutely. It needs to be because confidential computing is anchored in remote attestation. But remote attestation right now, as I said, has no relying party empathy. So we need to inject that.
Yeah, sure, I
Right.
understand.
So that's
Yeah.
so in fact, I think the draft for the next ATF should be renamed. We should be talking about stable identifiers.
Okay, maybe we should present it in a proper manner. Just one
Yeah.
note, Mark, on closing remark. You asked for 30 minutes, which was indeed a bit excessive because RATS is a packed agenda sessions and people usually get 15 to max 20 minutes, but that's fine. We shall see
Yeah.
what the chairs assign
Well,
us.
let's see what they say. It's just like you see how much discussion we're having here, and even like in a small part of this. And in here, we're presenting 4 different sequence diagrams, or 5.
Yes. Which is a big thing.
It's a
You have
big
to
thing.
you will not be able to present the whole document there, draft, but you need to present crisp 5 or 6 slides
Yeah.
to open discussion and say, hey, we can't discuss everything here. Go back, read the draft, and come back to us on the mailing list. And that's how we engage more audience on the discussion.
Right.
But
I guess what I want to take up most of the time is actually I want to motivate why it's so important to have stable identifiers. It's not really about reading the sequence diagrams. People can do this on their own.
yes,
But what
exactly.
I've been hammering for the last 2 years, actually, and finally it's coming to this, is this idea. We need, if we don't have stable identifiers, we don't really have adoption.
Yeah.
So anyway, all right, I'll see you guys next week. Thank you for today.
Yeah, I won't be able to be here next week. I'm off and traveling personal stuff. So, but anyway,
All right,
good luck,
sounds good.
guys.
Well, I'll
Have
see you
fun.
when I see you.
Yeah, I see you.
Right.
I think, yeah, later.
Take care.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.